Yeah, please. Ready? Okay. At the time of...
Do a clap.
Oh, yeah. At the time of recording this, it is the end of 2024. We have been doing the In Good Company podcast now for just over a year, I think a year and a half, something like that. One thing we've not done in that time is introduce you to our main podcast organizer in that time, the brains behind the operation. So I'm delighted to be joined today by a very special guest who is the organizer of this podcast, the brains behind the operation, the wonderful Ailey Shackleton. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me, Dan.
It's great to have you here finally, because I've been badgering you to come on as a guest for quite some time, or a co-host even. And we've finally gotten around to doing it. So I'm delighted about that. So I'm going to, first of all, give the chance of our audience to get to know you a little bit better. So why don't you tell us about yourself in 60 seconds?
Why don't I flip that right back to you? As the brains behind this operation,
Yeah.
you are the face, Dan.
Yes.
You're the face for over 40 episodes.
I know.
Our
Who'd have
guests
thought?
have watched you ask this question, and nobody has ever said...
No, that's very true. They haven't. There's probably good reasons for that. But yes. So, all right, fine. You've used the Uno reverse card. I'll accept that. So, yeah, I'm Dan. I have been working for Impact for 10 years. During that time, I joined the company working in IT, and then did that for 4 years, and then kind of expressed my interest in making media content for Impact, both for our marketing and solutions. So I kind of did that unofficially for a bit, and then gradually we decided that, there was a need there. So I moved to the marketing team, where I've been ever since. And at some point during that time, we've started up this podcast together where I've become the host somehow. But it's great. Yeah, I love it. So I'm really pleased to be doing this, because in this past 18 months, I've learned so much already, not only from the production side of things of this, but also so much about the world of work, leadership, and everything that goes with it. So yeah, thank you, and thank you for organising it all, because of course I don't think I'd be able to do it by myself.
We are a good team.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Right, Uno reverse card again. Tell us about yourself.
So my name is Ailey. I work alongside you and the global marketing team here at Impact. And I've been in this role on and off for 15 years or so, working at Impact. And I think it's safe to say that working on this podcast is one of our favourite bits of our role at the moment. 40 episodes in, and I don't think when we started this we had any idea of the variety of guests that we would have on, people from across the Impact world, from across our network. And like you say, we have learned a lot about leadership and talent and just everything that kind of that links to people in workplaces. It's been just so interesting. So to come together, I obviously am not the face of the podcast. I'm much happier behind the screen. So, but you know,
who knows? Hopefully that will change into the next season. So. Okay, so today what we're going to do is kind of have a little bit of a look back at the past year of podcast episodes that we've had. We've brought along some clips that we're going to talk about, but just generally, have a bit of a chit-chat of kind of our favourite highlights of the year. So why don't we get straight into that, and I'll ask you, what's your first clip that you brought along? Tell us about the episode that we're going to talk about first.
Okay, so the reason that I've gone for this as my first pick, it's the episode that we recorded earlier this year with Jamais Cascio, who is the creator of the BANI framework.
Yeah.
And the reason this one kind of stood out for me is because for a long time, 10, 12 years, one of our most popular blogs has been about VUCA. So the acronym that was created by the American military for volatile, uncertain, complexity and ambiguity. So that kind of framework that was for a military but then has really transferred over into like organisations. And Jamais Cascio a few years ago realised that kind of wasn't enough anymore, that the world had changed.
Yeah.
that he came up with the framework BANI, so for when things are brittle, anxious, non-linear and incomprehensible. And we started talking about this, and it just felt like it was resonating with so many of our clients.
Yeah.
And we wanted to do a podcast about this.
Yeah.
And we were like, who are we going to ask to talk about this? And I messaged Jamais and said, would you like to come on our podcast and talk about this framework that you've created? Not expecting to hear back from him. And he was like, yeah, of course I can. And not only was he happy to do that, but we were the first organisation really in the Western world to ask him to speak about it. So it just felt like, it was a bit of a scoop for us, the small team of In Good Company.
Yeah. Yeah, it was a great conversation, and as you said, he sort of mentioned that we were the first company in the UK or the first organisation to have reached out to him to talk about it in this country, and so it was interesting, kind of, because he didn't write it for the business world, nor was VUCA written, as you've mentioned, for the business world, but it's been adopted by the business world. Both have, because it's a framework that you could both to look at the state of the world, and there were kind of what we wanted to explore about it was, okay, well, the framework is a good starting point. So what's the what next? What can organizations do to actually to address the issues that it kind of raises? So that's kind of what we explored with Jamais on the episode. So perhaps the next thing to do would be to look at the clip that we've brought, and then we can kind of go from there. So let's have a look. What advice would you give to leaders to lead through or by using a BANI framework?
I had actually come up with some initially responsive concepts. So in a brittle world, you focus on resilience, the capacity to bend rather than break. In an anxious world, you focus on empathy. In a nonlinear world where there's disproportionality, look at improvisation. Figure out your skills to be able to respond in the moment rather than just going by a script. And for a incomprehensible world, a diversity of perspective. These, for me, are also very human responses. But what they're very much based on, what do we as people, how do we experience this world? How do we respond to this world as individuals, as groups, together?
There was some interesting stuff there, and what I really liked what you said was about that human response, which of course for us resonates really well. I think the conversation generally was a really interesting one because, of course, in some ways we actually challenged his thinking a little bit, because we were in fact, he was also mentioning that somebody challenged him to look at kind of the hopeful alternatives, because both VUCA and BANI are both kind of a bleak outlook on the world, largely because there's a lot of bleakness going on, but there's also a lot of hope, and you kind of need hope to move forward. So he was challenged by a friend, I think it was, or a colleague of his.
The book together, I think.
Is that, yeah?
I think so.
It's challenging my memory there, but he's kind of working on the moment, the sort of the opposite, the alternate way to sort of have a sort of a more positive outlook on as a way of moving forward, isn't it?
Yeah. And we'd had a conversation internally as well before we recorded with one of our colleagues, Andy Dixon, who was like, he said, these frameworks are great, but actually, like you say, they can't just, organisations can't just look at this and go, oh, right, well, that's it, we give up. So he was like, what are the responses to the frameworks?
Yeah.
And Jamais articulated it there beautifully. And I think for us, it really resonated that these are all things that impact work with people to develop, to improve, to raise awareness of. And so, it was like, actually, I think there were a lot of people, we've heard from a lot of people who've watched this podcast that VUCA still very much has a place, but actually BANI can sit alongside that It just depends kind of which context that your organisation is in at the time. So
and
really
VUCA, as you've put there, VUCA, we had another episode just on VUCA with Kay Woodburn, and it was true. Like VUCA has stood the test of time for well over 30 years, and it's kind of is it no longer relevant? It kind of asks that question, or is it still relevant? But also, so it's not so much VUCA versus BANI, but VUCA and BANI. There's cause for conversation around that.
Absolutely. And I think that, we know from our statistics for our website that those pages are still the ones that people want to read, they want to understand more of. And it's a hot topic for the year. And I think that nicely moves us on to another topic of the year, probably the topic of the year, that we've recorded a couple of sort of standalone podcasts, if you like, about AI. I can't think of any podcast that we've done where it hasn't come up at some point. So it's something that is so interesting. But one of the latest podcasts that we recorded with Stacy Eng from Chevron, I know is one that you have picked out. So
well, it was one of the most recent, and we had a great conversation. AI is it's such a big topic at the moment, isn't it? That there's no getting away from AI, I think, unless you do live in a forest with no internet. The AI is here, and it's increasing in capability every day in a sort of an exponential speed, and so it's important that organizations are looking at AI, both in how they might use it, how they might not use it, and so on. So we talked with Stacy Eng, who's been doing a lot of work around the AI and HR space and what role HR has in AI. The clip we've got here is actually an analogy that sums up what her best analogy for summing up what AI is. And so let's have a look at the clip, and then we'll talk more after.
The best quote I heard is that AI is not replacing your job, but the future of jobs is for people who know how to use AI. One analogy I would give you is the Star Wars analogy.
Right.
AI is like a lightsaber. It's a super powerful tool, but you still need a master Jedi who has the right proper training, who know how to use the Force to be able to unlock the full potential of this tool. And right now, where we start to see AI come into the workplace, we need to meet more people who know how to use AI and being able to unleash that power in terms of what the tool can bring. So if we see the role of HR, especially you think about what we can do so that we can train up master Jedi who can actually wield this tool of AI in the workplace.
So that was Stacey's podcast all around AI, and the Star Wars analogy I think was a really nice one, and it was one that I'd not heard before. I had heard that AI isn't necessarily going to replace your job, but people using AI will. And I think to some extent that's true. I think that AI is an extremely powerful and useful tool. However, it does need to be approached with caution. I think there's a lot of ethics around it that needs to be explored. I don't think we have all the answers yet, but we're certainly getting that way. So it was really interesting chatting to Stacy about that. We've had a few episodes on AI, and or at least if it's not been about AI as a full episode, there's definitely been references to it because it's hard to avoid. What did you think of that episode?
Oh, I just thought from the moment you asked the question, and Stacy then started to give a Star Wars analogy, I thought she is putting this into a language that I can understand, that you can understand, that our audience could understand, because like you say, generative AI is here, it's going to stay, and there's lots of fear mongering about, is it going to take my job? Am I going to have a job? Are you going to have a job? We watch podcasts that are generated.
Yeah, the whole thing.
That they aren't real people sitting there having a conversation. And I just thought she was, in every answer she gave, she was putting it into like plain English, demystifying it. Yeah, nobody has all the answers. Nobody has all the answers to anything that's going on in the world at the moment. But actually, yeah, she did a great job. And I could tell the minute she said Star Wars and lightsaber, I was like, this makes sense.
Yeah. And it was, and of course that then led nicely into a bit more of an analogy later on down the line when we started talking about ethics and that kind of thing. Because of course, there are many ways in which AI can be used for good reasons, for improving life, but also it could have the opposite effect if not used carefully. So we circle back on that analogy that, used correctly, it's like the Jedi Master. Used incorrectly, of course, you're turning to the dark side. Darth Vader with an AI, ChatGPT. So yeah, no, it was really interesting, and I think the topic of AI will probably be another hot topic for next year as well. Yeah. I think that's guaranteed. Interestingly, kind of what we talked about now is a lot around multiple kind of so big topics that we talk about, and looking at the state of the world, looking at kind of things that are having an impact on the world. One episode that I wanted to talk about also was looking at all of these things that are kind of going on in the world and how we approach those things. And it was the episode was around the term polycrisis, which I'd not even heard of. I've not heard that term. So I wanted to kind of explore that. And the guest was Thimon De Jong. And we've known Thimon for quite a few years because he's spoken at our flagship learning event, LearnFest, which we're hoping to run again soon. And so, I wanted to kind of bring up the clip here, where he kind of explores a little bit about what polycrisis is. So maybe let's, again, watch the clip and then we'll come back to it.
It's a word people like me, sociologists, social psychologists, use to describe the current state of the world. It's also known as a permacrisis or metacrisis, if you would like to look it up. And it's a word we use to describe the state of the world where it's definitely from a people perspective feels like all these crises are coming at the same time, or all these crises are rapidly following each other. They're interconnected. Yeah. And it feels like we haven't gotten a break. Like with single crisis, we get a crisis, then we get time to recuperate, and then there's another crisis because there's crisis all the time. But now, polycrisis, it started with COVID, the multiple waves of COVID, and then we didn't get a break and we're straight into Ukraine war, straight into an energy crisis, inflation, cost of living crisis, mental health crisis. Of course, the climate crisis was ongoing, but it keeps coming back and forward it onto our radar. Of course, Israel and Gaza is the latest addition to the polycrisis, and it overwhelms people, and people feel numb. And I look at it from a people perspective. You also have the academic, historical perspective, and people look at this and actually look at how are these crises all connected and do they reinforce each other as well. But that's a bit more zooming out. I look at the effect the polycrisis has on behavior, and then specifically for organizations, professionals, leaders.
That was a great episode, Dan, and I think I agree. We always want to know what our guests would like to talk about. And this was an area that Thimon was like, a lot of people are talking to me about polycrisis. And we were both like, great, what does that mean?
Yeah,
but we recorded that at a time where we'd been having lots of different conversations with different guests, with Paul Rose about ecology and the environment. We were scheduled to talk to Kate Simpson about systems leadership. And all of these things, it felt like Thimon's was the podcast that brought it all together. Yeah. So now it's like, yeah, of course, it's a polycrisis. Look at all these different things. And you can so easily get into like an overwhelm. And I think he just, in his very calm way, was like, it's okay. We don't have to have the answer to everything. It's like, break it down. And so, yeah, it was such a fascinating episode.
Yeah, he has a real matter-of-fact way of looking at life, doesn't he? And kind of like, he's really good at, and I know that a lot of us aren't very good at, kind of processing information and processing things in a way of, in a way that it means he doesn't seem to worry about the big things that a lot of people are worrying about. He'll kind of process it and kind of, I guess, categorize things in like, what does he have an immediate influence over? What could he actually change? And if there's nothing, then okay, well, back of mind, deal with the things that you do have to worry about, that you do have to kind of have a direct action on. And we even talking of AI, we talked about it in that episode, and because I have a bit of an interesting relationship with AI, or a different thinking on it, and then being from quite a techie background, there are elements of AI that do concern me, that if we're not careful, we could go down the wrong path with. And he was like, well, what is it you're actually worried about? What are you scared of? He said. And I was like, well, I don't think it is a fear. But then I kind of thought, well, maybe it is stemmed around fear. But he was more concerned about like the future generation and just still being hooked to their devices. I mean, it's already a thing that people are too reliant on devices, technology. I mean, how far are we away from our phones right now? Not very far, and it takes a lot of effort for a lot of people to come out of that. But yeah, the looking at sort of the polycrisis as an overall theme, I thought was really interesting, kind of, and it goes kind of hand in hand in what we were talking about earlier with Jamais, is the BANI and the polycrisis are kind of two things that are so intertwined that you. But then it was a case of we needed to kind of figure out we didn't, but Impact need to figure out what can be done, what can we help our clients do to help navigate through these and grow and develop in the future. So it's been fascinating. Thoughts?
Yeah, it really has. And I think as a learning and development organisation, we certainly are not going into organisations to tell them what they need to do.
No.
But we're working with the people in those organisations who are in a much better position to work out what their organisations need to do for whatever their purpose is. And but one of the things that we have been really involved in this year was a conference with Common Goal before the in between the semi-final and the final of the soccer, depending on where you're listening to this podcast from. The Euros. And Impact helped Common Goal with running a conference for like a few hundred people, I think it was, influencers across the football world, that was very linked with the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah.
And the power that football has to do good. So not just to be a big money-making organisation, or, that's about the top players, but really what can it do at grassroots level and for the Sustainable Development Goals.
Yeah.
And through that conference, we met our next guest, Isabella Echeverri.
Very good. Well done. Well pronounced.
Who is a Colombian football player, was a Colombian football player, and now is very closely linked to Common Goal. And I think she was one of the guests who, at the end of, as I was watching in the green room behind the scenes, I was like, oh, that was inspirational. That was like,
she really is. Yeah.
What could we all do to be a little bit more Isabella?
Yeah.
And I think in that way that, Thimon was so like manage what you can control. I think that's some of the stories that Isabella told. And there are so many, in all of the podcasts, there are so many clips that we can pick out.
Yeah.
But we picked one out here of Isabella, kind of her moment of standing up to, the big Colombian like government football and let's watch the clip.
Sure.
There's not the same amount of salaries, money going into the players' pocket. So in 2019, I got together with one of my best friends, Melissa Ortiz, and we have been playing for the Colombian national team for many years, right? And we realized, you know what, we need to do something to change this. And we got together, we released the video. It went viral when things didn't go as viral as they go
Yeah.
right now. You know, everybody was talking about it. We did a press conference and we realized how much power we had. We talked to the federation, and it was a turning point in Colombian football. Now the team has better conditions, more preparation, more prize money, right? But that is when I realized the power athletes, players have.
So one of the things that struck me about that clip is, and the whole episode generally, was we at Impact, we often talk about, because leadership often gets thought of as a special type of person, which in many ways it can be, but also it should be thought about as a special type of action, and so it can and should come from anyone. And so, and I think what struck me there was that, you know, Isabella and Melissa saw a need for change. And they thought, well, nobody else is going to do it, so we'll do it. And they stood up and they took an active leadership and they spoke out against and about the changes that they thought were needed, because, you know, they weren't getting paid. They had to buy their own kit, football kit, and their own football boots to play in the national team. And so they thought, right, no, enough's enough. So they made this video, they took that active leadership, and change happened. And I think what's particularly inspiring about that is that, particularly in football, where it's such a male-dominated sport, that to see she instantly made a role model of herself, even more than she probably already was, to young women and girls that are wanting to get into football. Because, and we talked about the importance of role models in that episode as well. But as an active leadership, that one really struck a chord with me. I thought it was really, really impressive.
Yeah,
and really inspiring.
There were so many things in that episode, because I think, you know, Isabella is not pretending that she made one video and that's like equaled the balance.
Yeah.
You know, there is still this huge need for diversity, for equality. You know, that's not just in the sporting world. But she talks so eloquently about that, and also about, like you say, the different styles of leadership. I think Isabella had been captain of every team that she'd played on.
Yeah, I'd
like
that, yeah.
You know, the Olympic team, her national team. You know, she's played all over the world. I don't think there's many footballers out there that will be able to say that they were the captain of every team. And she talked about the different styles of leadership on a pitch and how much they're valued. So you don't have to be the captain to still be leading. You can be somebody leading very quietly on the sidelines.
Yeah.
But I think the one thing, a lot of people have that feeling of imposter syndrome. And Isabella went on to talk about that moment of leadership with her best friend Melissa, and she'd been asked at the Common Goal conference that would you have done it on your own? And she said she'd never been asked that question before, but for her, actually having somebody by her side gave her that extra strength to kind of say, I'm going to stand up and say this isn't right.
Yeah.
And again, I think that so many people think leadership has got to be, you know, here I am, single figure.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be.
No.
So it was just such a variety of different perspectives. It was a really interesting episode.
Well, and that lands so well for our clients as well, because again, we'll work with teams, and therefore that hammers home that active leadership point, is that an active leadership can come from a team, not necessarily an individual within that team. And that's something we do a lot of work around. So it's a really nice way of kind of summing up what you've just talked about there. We've already covered a lot in this episode. In terms of the topics we've talked about, we've kind of talked about complexity, navigating complexity. We talked about active leadership, women in leadership, AI, of course. Also this year, a massive focus has been around wellbeing. And we've had at least 2 or 3, possibly 4 episodes around wellbeing. We do have a clip that we're going to share that I know what's coming in this clip, and you know what's coming in this clip too. And I'm not dreading it, but I'm going to find it uncomfortable, that's for sure. As you'll see in the clip that we're going to show, maybe we should watch it straight away and then we can talk about it.
And one of my go-to is EFT, or emotional freedom techniques. It's a form of acupressure tapping. And we start by just tapping the pinky side edges of the hand together. This is the karate chop point, and saying the phrase. So even though I'm stressed, I deeply and completely accept myself. Then you tap under the nose above the lips. Even though I'm stressed, I deeply and completely accept myself. And then you tap under the lips on the chin. Even though I'm stressed, I deeply and completely accept myself. Then you can tap this whole heart, chest, thymus area. Even though I'm stressed, I deeply and completely accept myself. Then, as if you're hugging yourself, you can tap this side of the ribs. Even though I'm stressed, I deeply and completely accept myself. Then you can just go right under the rib cage on the stomach. Even though I'm stressed, I deeply and completely accept myself.
So I should make it very clear that Sahar was brilliant. She was absolutely amazing on the episode. I, however, find that type of activity a little bit uncomfortable. I don't know if that was obvious.
That was obvious. And I think what was funnier was that we had asked Sahar if she would, she talked about wellbeing, diversity, how that like fits into an organisation. Yeah. And we had said to her, would you do a short like exercise for us?
Yeah.
And she did that.
Yeah, and brilliantly.
And we both did it. Of course, I was in the green room off screen.
Because you loved it.
I absolutely loved it. And I use that regularly.
Yeah.
Whereas I think I even had my eyes closed and I opened them at one point and I thought, oh, Dan, this is not your bag.
It's just not my cup of tea. No. I think that was what was, but that's totally accepted, you know, like people manage their well-being in different ways, right? And this was what we asked for, and she delivered it brilliantly, was something that anybody could do anywhere if they felt the need, you know, that whether, because we spend so much time in front of our screens, that this was and of course it meant that we could do it as part of that episode as well. People could sit along at home and do it. It's, for me personally,
it wasn't
it's just not for me.
We do have that. We do have the full clip of that, which I think we'll link to, because I mean, I use it. So I think, you know, if you're interested in being a bit more A-ly.
Yeah, a bit less down. Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, but there was the parts of it that I think were resonating and we don't. One of the things that I did like about it was the sort of self-love talk, I guess, because, you know, maybe it's a cultural thing, but we're so quick to criticize ourselves that we don't necessarily give ourselves the chance to say it's okay. Even if I'm not doing so great, it's fine. I'm still balanced. I'm still central. I'm still here. Tomorrow's a new day. That type of approach. And we're so quick to not do that. You know, I've certainly been there. I'm sure plenty of other people have too. So there were elements of it that I thought were great. But yeah, I personally, I don't connect with the sort of self-tapping in the same way that others, such as yourself, would. I'd much prefer to go out and be amongst nature, would be my... Yeah,
absolutely. Know. And we discussed that with Sahar. And like you say, there were other podcasts this year with Dr. Jen Gandhi. That was another great one that was really about, you know, mental resilience, well-being. You know, and again, I think that topic has come up in a lot of other podcasts. It's something that people are just more and more aware of, and more interested in. And like you say, wellness is not about a spa day.
No.
It's not for everyone about tapping or yoga.
Yeah.
It can be about anything.
That's it.
One of the examples that Sahar gave that I think resonated with both of us, for her well-being, was taking an hour before she came to the podcast to prepare for it.
Yeah.
And that was important for her. And so many things that we rush to rush, that it's just like taking some time to prepare for some things is actually really important for well-being.
Absolutely. I mean, it even came up in the VUCA episode about, kind of having that time to properly slow down and switch off before the end of a working day. Even there was a tip that Kay shared about, instead of finishing your day at 5, close your laptop at 4:45. And then before you even start the commute back to home, if that's where home or whatever, or if you're working at home, of course, you've still got that 15 minutes that's just for you to do whatever it is that you need to do to just finish the workday and start the personal time in the evening. And I think that's, obviously there's going to be occasions where that's not going to be possible for everyone. But if that is possible to you, just making that small change can make a big difference.
Absolutely. And I think we've had tips across a lot of the podcasts this year. It's quite often something that you like to ask the guests.
Yeah.
A takeaway that makes it useful for our listeners.
Yeah,
so
for sure.
We have definitely brought some different things, like you say, let's stop our day, let's prepare a little bit more, let's purposely prepare a bit more.
Well, and just on that, really, the fact that we all rush, we as Impact have got 2 things that I think are worth noting, and that's it. We have a Monday morning, like most places, we have a Monday morning meeting every week, with the exception of the last Monday of the month, where we have a wellbeing hour or wellbeing time. So the idea is that you, in the hour slot or 45-minute slot that we normally have the Monday morning meeting, you can go and have the time to do whatever it is that you do to manage your wellbeing. Might be go for a walk, might be to go for a coffee with a friend, whatever. So I think we purposely make that decision as an organisation to do that. The other one is that we've all seemingly started 45-minute meetings rather than an hour. Particularly, so you've got that. Because, I mean, how many times have we been on back-to-back calls where you don't have time to think in between them? So you've got to go from one meeting to the next without any processing time. So we deliberately started doing 45-minute meetings, which also, of course, can speed up the agenda. When our final bonus one, actually, is with the marketing meeting, we have a bit of a kind of a social, cultural icebreaker at the beginning of each weekly meeting. And that I really value, because you get to know your colleagues loads better. It's fun. And it does genuinely warm you up into the rest of the meeting before you get into the sort of heavier agenda type stuff. Yeah. So are there anything that you would add to that list?
I don't think so, but I think we are looking more at teams and team dynamics at the moment. And like you say, that I can get so quickly into a meeting, let's get through this, that actually it's the people side of it that is the thing that makes things enjoyable and quicker in the long run. So understanding, especially in a virtual world as a global team, it's so hard to get those dynamics right at times.
And I think one key thing from there would be that if you're sort of a leader in the team or had a leadership position in the team, noticing what preferences work well for people, because it could be that you would try and force that kind of cultural element. Right, everyone, we're going to do an icebreaker, and everybody just goes, cameras off, like, I'm not getting involved. It could totally happen.
Yeah,
and I think
you need to build that.
Absolutely. It's something you either, or if not build, just recognise that's not a preference that your people within that team want.
Yeah.
So you just, I think that's a key, which is often talked about in our leadership model, is that element of noticing and kind of working out if that's the right action. Great. Well, I think that we're about at the end of our episode. Almost. Because, of course, you know what's coming next. At the end of each episode, we ask our guests to reflect and look back on their careers. And we ask them, and we're going to do the same. I assume I'll be doing the same as well, which is to answer the question of, if you were to look back on your career, knowing what you know now, what advice, if any, would you give yourself?
this is a hard one because we have watched 50 leaders answer this question, and for most of them I go, yeah, point. For me, I think it boils down to a human element of treat everyone as you would like to be treated yourself. Advice that my mother gave me as a small child, and I think stands you well. The second, moisturise your neck, kids.
You're drawing attention to something that doesn't need drawing attention to.
What about you, Dan?
Well, like you said, this is probably one of my favourite questions that we ask of all of our guests, because it not only gives me a real insight into their lives, but also I'm like, oh yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, like writing them down. So I am actually I'm gonna steal one, which is actually from the last year's episode, but it is one that particularly struck a chord with me, which is panic slowly. Because that was from Darren Evans, CEO of Calder Stewart. Panic slowly resonated so much with me because I am a worrier. I do have anxiety. I avoid the word suffer from, because for me it's something that in some ways can be quite beneficial, the fight or flight response. But yeah, certainly processing and panicking slowly would help me, so to not get to the heightened anxiety symptoms that I often feel like I experience. So that one was a particularly good one. But to play the game properly and to answer my own question, well, your question, I would say trust the process. That one is a particularly good one because you sometimes you do have to go, actually, this is I'm not particularly fate-driven person, but sometimes things do kind of happen for a reason, or if not, things will find a way of working themselves out, and so trust the process. You'll get through it, or whatever it is that it is. So and then what I often do is kind of throw back and say, do we live by that advice? So do you live by yours?
I'm just thinking that. I'm sure there are times where I could be a better version of myself in situations.
Yeah, and I think the same. As much as you try to live by these great pieces of advice, it's impossible to do it all of the time, I think, because we're all human. So sometimes when things get the better, it's there as a tool for you to just go, actually, I'll take a step back. And that's where that reflection piece is so powerful. Because sometimes you just need that reflective pause, step out from whatever it is, and just go, okay, yeah. I think that's it. I think that's it. Well, I've had a great conversation with you today. I've really enjoyed it. And I hope that we will be sitting next to each other, microphones in front of us again, because I think it's been really great. So thank you, Ailey, for joining me today. And I suppose that just leaves us to say that if you haven't already, go through and click all the links in the description for the clips from today's episode. And of course, go back and see the full episodes, or listen to them, so you can listen to them on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And then, of course, on YouTube, where you can see them as well. So if you want to learn any more about impact, then the link for that will all be in the description of wherever you found this episode. So thank you once more to Ailey for joining me today. Thank you, Ailey.
Yeah.
And until the next time, take care.
Take care.